Hi there, Clayton Jacobson here, just talking about Brothers Nest, my new movie that's coming out on the 21st of June.
So the first one I wanted to speak to you about was the financing.
Yep.
So I'm sure we've gotten a bunch of questions about. I remember last year chatting to Eddie Tamir just after the Australian International Movie Convention. And he was saying about how interesting the sort of financial arrangements to get this film made were. Are you able to elaborate a bit on?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've mentioned the key character in all of this is Eddie. I shot Eddie's wedding video many years ago in the 80s, and we've been friends for many years. And because of that, I have often heard him talk about the industry and how it works and the connection he has with filmmakers and you know, when he has to work through distribution and just, you know, the myriad of difficulties that an exhibitor has to deal with. And I've known for a long time that Eddie has, first and foremost, he's a filmmaker. So I actually edited a short film that Eddie made when he was at film school many years ago, and he's a really good filmmaker. He's a great storyteller, so he gets it. And because of it, he loves the connection to filmmakers. And so in all of our conversations, he would often talk about how he wished he could have a greater connection to the filmmaker, and that he would actually pay for that privilege if he thought he could have some access or exclusivity or some extra, you know, say in how film got shown to his audience. And so I asked the question, you know, what would you be willing to, because that's an interesting proposition. And then when he mentioned the sort of figure, I went, well, that's, you know, that seems like not too big a risk. It is a risk. Everything is always a risk, but it's not, you know, it's not a huge gamble, the sort of money he was talking about. And that got me thinking. And then, you know, I let that go. And then I went about my business trying to make my films. And then I had a really big film that I've been working on for 10 years fall over. And I really found myself sitting at my property, quite honestly, debating whether I wanted to continue. You know, like I made a film that did really well 10 years ago, and I've struggled ever since to get another one made. And you just sit there scratching your head going, what am I doing wrong? I don't understand. The answer to that question is I was trying to investigate too many varied genres, and people want you to repeat yourself. So then this script rocked up, and when this script rocked up, I thought, I really want to make this. And Shane and a good friend of mine who had worked on a number of films said, why don't you go back to the Kenny model and you know, just think more like the maverick that you were when you were doing Kenny. You know, you didn't use the film industry in any way, shape or form when you did Kenny. Go back to that. And it was a sort of a depressing proposition, because what I said was, well, I was hoping I could work on a film with a decent budget, you know, and get some, you know, great cast. Well, anyway, long story short, it got me thinking, and then I was reminded of the conversations with Eddie. This is a long-winded answer, but it's the truth of how it played out. And so what happened was, I thought, well, the best part of releasing Kenny was the connection that the regional independent cinemas had with that film, and how hard they worked on our behalf to get audiences into the cinema. And I thought, well, knowing Eddie's stance, they've got to have a similar feeling. I haven't got the sort of money to market nationally that you normally would. And regional independent cinemas know their audiences really well, and they work within their own social media marketing strategies. So I thought, if I get them interested and I massage the marketing directly to their patrons from day one, even before we start the film, it could be a really great union, and maybe they'll get on board and get behind it. And so we went to the movie convention and we pitched it to all the independents, and they loved the idea. And before we knew it, we'd accrued something like $240,000 in cinema interest, and then just putting forward a small advance towards the movie hire. And there were 3 different levels of it, and depending on what level they entered, they would either get a red carpet or, you know, it was just sort of diminishing, sort of you know, massaging depending on what sort of money they came in. But the bottom line was we then suddenly had a release date, and we had cinemas hooked in, and we had investors essentially that have dipped their toe in. And the hardest part about making film is waiting for the first, you know, when you go to cast a movie, you get told by international sales agents, you know, you can't make this film unless you have X, Y, and Z. You know, we would like it if you had these kind of actors. And then you go to those actors and they'll tell you, well, it's a pay-for-play sort of situation. And unless you've got money, we're not interested. Then you go to an investor and they say, well, you get an actor and then we'll put them... You know, everyone is waiting for... We're all standing around this pond waiting for someone to jump in. And God bless them, the cinemas did that for me. All triggered through Eddie. And they didn't just put their toe in, they dipped their whole foot in. And then it was up and running. Everyone suddenly came on, the universe sort of conspired to help us from that point on.
Mm. And it's interesting you said that you know, you're marketing from sort of day one.
Yeah.
These regional cinemas. What form did that take?
Well, what it was an agreement to basically get patrons from these cinemas to understand that their cinema directly is responsible for a new movie that's coming out. And so, from even before we'd even cast the film, we were sending Christmas messages the minute we got, you know, came back from the movie convention, and Shane and I were just sending messages wishing the cinema owners. They were personal messages to the cinema owners, just wishing them a great Christmas, and that, you know, we're heading towards a May shoot. Then I think we did about 3 or 4 right up until the point of shoot, and then when we had cast, we announced the cast, and then we started talking to their patrons, and then we started doing, you know, pieces to camera that could be literally played in their cinema. And we did that through the shooting of the film, and then through the post-production of the film, and then even when the film, you know, even then when Star Wars came out, we started spoofing, you know, Star Wars, and what was great about that was part of the agreement was that we would have a dialogue, and so we asked the independents and the regionals, you know, how do you want the film marketed to your audience? And it was suggested to us, don't give us 1 3-minute trailer. Can we have like 3 or 4 shorter moments? And let it, you know, Kenny was a comedy, and this film is a sort of a dark thriller / drama, and there's comedy in it. But don't just give us that. Can you kind of bleed, you know, the marketing to it that was really astute, the stuff that we were being asked and told about. So that's what we did. We literally followed those, and we're still to this very, like I've just come from Adelaide. I talked to Paul there from Wallace Cinemas, and he was giving us some ideas of how he would like his patrons to be sort of approached through some of their membership mail-outs. And we're embracing that and doing it. So it's about having a much greater connection, because, you know, people forget it's the staff at cinemas and the managers and the programmers that are literally ushering people into Australian films a lot of the time. Yeah. So that's been important for us too. Just you know, making sure that they do have a personal connection. They get a credit in the movie.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Never seen that before.
No. Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, you're right. Like, you know, you go to somewhere like Palace Cinemas or one of those more independent cinemas, and there are people there just chatting to, you know, the staff members that they've seen every Tuesday or Wednesday.
They know them by name.
Weekly, yeah.
Yeah, they know them by name.
And they'll like go up and ask for a recommendation on what to see. They're not coming with a preconceived notion of what they want to see. So
yeah. I used to have that. Look, a lot of this thinking came from. I worked in video stores for a long time, in about 3 or 4 different video stores, and I watched the behaviour of people and how they chose movies, and I was often asked for recommendations, and I worked out very quickly that I wasn't recommending to them. Oh, I'm sorry, that was me. I worked out very quickly that I wasn't recommending to them the films I wanted to watch. I would do the homework and ask them what they had seen lately, identify the kind of films they like, and then steer them towards something that was within that kind of canon. Yeah. And in a weird sort of way, that's what we're trying to offer with the cinemas. Is like your audience may be different to your audience, and you know, tell us how do you want us to, you know. So it has been slightly different for each cinema, you know. Yeah.
And then you also mentioned, you know, you got this script. So what was it about? You know, what was it about the script that sort of attracted you?
Well, on a purely sort of business side of things, you know, I have been, as is everyone, you know, I was pigeonholed as the comedy guy, and so whenever I've had any other genre that I've tried to slide across the table, it's met with a sort of a bemused look of, what? You know, you want to do a musical, or you know, I'm sorry, this is a sort of psychological thriller about a 13-year-old child. I don't understand. And I've had producers literally say to me, I don't see how how the Kenny guy can do this. So that has been my problem, because I don't want to repeat myself. I do want to make films that are varied and different. And so when I read this, I immediately, first of all, I loved it because it was about family issues, and that is a theme that I gravitate towards father-son stories. I think the root of most problems in this world is the damage that's done to us in our youth, and our desire for validation, and how that is either met or not met, or our misconceptions about how we are or aren't being validated. And so they're themes that are important to me. So when I read the script, it immediately tapped into that. But more so, I went, this is a great script because it literally swings a pendulum from something that an audience will assume I can do, and producers assume I can do, into an area that will throw them off kilter, and I can kind of kneecap them a little bit halfway through the film. And I'm so glad to say it's resonating with people, but more so the powers to be are now paying attention to those other scripts.
Okay.
So not only do I get a great story out of this, and an opportunity to work with Shane again, and I really do, I'm really proud of the film. It is allowing that shelf of scripts that's been sitting there for the last 10 years to suddenly come to life again as well.
Yeah, because it is interesting, I guess, that blend of the darkness and the comedy aspects. Certainly, as you say, like the start's probably a bit more comedy than dark.
Yeah.
And it's probably a bit more dark than
And
comedy.
it's also like the start's very sort of theatre, And it's interesting because Hollywood are now going down this track, this business of hybrid genres is something they're all interested in, because films like Get Out, The Surprise that happens, there's this renewed interest in what they're calling elevated drama, elevated genre. Okay. And I think really it's born out of the fact that we've got to a point where it's just so hard to surprise audiences. I mean, my son can sit there and predict the ending of every film that he watches, and I had him in mind too when I was making this film, not just audiences of my own age, but I thought I really want to make a film that can surprise people. So a lot of that is leading them by the hand into some areas that we will subvert later on.
Yeah. And one thing I really loved as well was the setting. I found that really added so much to it. It's very interesting, sort of like ranch cross kind of art. Was that important to you in terms of?
I love sense of place, a sense of tone, sense of colour. Creating a world is so important to me. Whether it's whether it's something like Paris, Texas, or what was that wonderful film of the cafe? There's been a number of films, like Wim Wenders films have that. I love it when a film can be contained, and where you've got the ability, and particularly it's also helpful when you're making a film that is restricted by budget, where you have some control over adding some extra production value. But in my case, I add production value by actually removing stuff. So we limited the colour palette. But also that location was a wonderful gift from the location manager that showed me this location. It was the first house he went to, and I discounted it because I said, well, there's nothing in the script about radios, and there's nothing about cars, and they're everywhere. Like every single room of this house is populated with these vintage radios. Where are we going to put them? What are we going to do? Like, I don't have the money to do that. And then I sent him off to look at another 80 or 90 houses around Victoria, and but that one just kept coming back to me, and I'm so glad we went back to it, because I knew that the house had to be a character in the film, and I very carefully snaked the film through the house, because I was aware that I didn't want it to feel stagnant. I know it's got a claustrophobic feel, but I didn't want it to feel too static. I wanted to keep the film moving through these different spaces. Yeah. And so I kind of plotted it out, so we sort of snake our way through the entire property and kind of work our way back through it. So I'm glad that resonated for you. We certainly loved it.
It's interesting.
What is that film I'm trying to think of?
With a cafe.
Yeah. Baghdad Cafe.
Okay.
Did you ever see Baghdad Cafe?
No,
Oh yeah, it's great. It was very simple. It was just all set, in a cafe, a caravan, and a desert. The Nevada desert.
Yeah.
And they just used those three elements, and they were able to have complete autonomy over the colour palettes because it was such a small area, but it was just rich. And so, Paris, Texas was a very similar sort of thing. I love films like, also Coppola's, even something like Rumblefish.
Okay.
It's very contained and it has a very highly stylized look. And I did obviously look through films like, I watched films like Rope, films like Trouble with Harry, and then I watched, Coen Brothers movies that had a sense of place. And Fargo, the TV series, actually, the second series was an influence.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's got the same sort of that Coen Brothers sort of tone between comedy and darkness. How do you balance that as a director?
It's funny because it's where I live. I have a really dark sense of humour, and so it's not something I have to work hard towards because it's just inherently there, and it's in our family's sense of humour. I think the human condition is funny. We're kind of funny when we're at our worst, and we can be funny when we're at our best. We're clumsy creatures, and that's why I like Coen Brothers movies. They seem to celebrate the fool a lot, and in doing so, they kind of draw attention to just how pathetic we can all be. That notion. I like films too that have a real strong foothold on a sense of style, but then chaos comes out of it. I don't know what it is. I've always really been attracted to domestic chaos in films. One of the films I loved growing up was The In-Laws. It was just an insane movie, totally insane. But yeah, managing the shift. The difficulty thing with this is when to start pulling back from it. I did a very similar thing with Kenny, actually. Like in the first 15 minutes I was aware that I would be harshly judged if I didn't have poo jokes in the film. So I thought, I'll get them all out of the way in the first 15. I'll hit everyone with a barrage of poo jokes. It backfired on me a little bit because people walked out of the cinema in the first 15 minutes because I thought, well, this is all this is.
All right.
But then they often had people telling them, no, you missed the point, you've got to go and see it again. And I got sort of twice. But in this case, I saw the film as two halves. The first half of the film is riding the shoulders in the fantasy world that is their projections of how they think things will play out. And then the last half is the reality of what happens when you instigate the unthinkable.
Yeah, that's really well done. One of the things that was interesting was, you're both director and actor in this. How'd you manage that sort of interface? Is that easier for you than, directing an actor who wasn't?
No, it's funny because I was in Kenny as well, and I remember I spent more time trying to write myself out of it than write myself. It's really true, to the point where I remember when the latter scenes in Kenny where they go camping as a family, and I thought, I just don't want that older brother hanging around when Kenny is trying to connect with his dad. I mean, this older brother has been the reason why the younger brother hasn't been able to actually fully appreciate that his father cares about him, probably more than the older brother. How do I get rid of him? Now that we're in so I concocted this whole thing of him calling a taxi in the middle of the night. It was really purely to get me out of the scene, so that the dad and my dad and Shane could have a moment in a tent together without me listening in or having to commentate. So with that in mind, when this came along and we were told it was written for us, and the first draft I read, the characters were called Clayton and Shane. Yeah, and which was both sort of flattering and actually a little troublesome.
Once you step inside here, you're in. What kind of criminals get caught?
The dumb ones. You're kidding me. What's with all the cleaning? You've got like 7 cleans in here.
Failing to plan is planning to fail.
I know that, Jeff. It's just a little intense seeing it all written down like this.
We can't have bruises, no scuffs, no scratches.
What's going on here?
All I wanted was a quiet place to come and eat some of Auntie Shirl's ginger fluff cake. I didn't get to the third bite. Wallop. You don't have to be hard up to do bad shit for money.
000 emergency. Are you after police, fire, or an ambulance?
Yeah, all of them?